I woke up to the sound of tires on gravel, something my ears hadn't missed since my days in combat zones. The clock read 6:17 a.m. Too early for visitors, too purposeful for someone who was lost. I grabbed my coffee and walked to the porch, spotting 3 black SUVs with tinted windows crawling up my long driveway like hungry predators. 15 years as a Navy SEAL had taught me to trust my gut, and right now it was screaming danger. I set my mug down on the porch railing, feeling the familiar calm before a storm wash over me. 4 men stepped out of the first vehicle, expensive suits that didn't quite hide the bulges of shoulder holsters. The leader stood out, tall with slicked back hair and a jagged scar running from the corner of his mouth to his jaw, a trophy from someone who'd fought back. "Beautiful morning," I called out, keeping my tone friendly while my eyes scanned their positions, vehicles, and the subtle hand signals they used to spread out. "Don't often get visitors this early." "Mr. Miller?" Scarface asked, approaching with unearned confidence. His accent wasn't local, New Jersey or maybe Boston. "That's me, Jack Miller." I stayed on the porch, giving me the high ground. "Something I can help you with. Mr. Wilson sends his regards." He smiled, revealing a gold tooth. "He's very interested in your property." I'd heard whispers about Wilson since moving here 3 years ago. A businessman, people said, but their eyes would shift when they mentioned his name. The kind of businessman who didn't take no for an answer. "Not for sale," I replied simply. "Never will be." Scarface's smile didn't waver. "Mr. Wilson is prepared to make a very generous offer. 3 times market value." "That's mighty generous," I said, picking up my mug again. "But this land isn't about money for me." The smallest of the 4 men stepped forward, opening a leather portfolio. "We're talking $2 million, Mr. Miller. Cash. Today." For a moment, I let myself remember what had brought me here. After my last deployment, the nightmares, the cold sweats, the feeling that I couldn't breathe in crowded places. This farm had saved me. The open spaces, the honest work, the rhythm of seasons, they had slowly put me back together when I was shattered. "I'm afraid you've wasted your trip, gentlemen," I said, noticing how they'd positioned themselves, tactical spacing, clear lines of sight. These weren't ordinary businessmen. "This farm isn't for sale at any price." Scarface's smile vanished. "Mr. Wilson doesn't handle rejection well." He gestured around. "Nice place you got. Would be a shame if something happened to it." The threat hung in the air like smoke. I set my mug down again, slower this time, feeling the familiar tightening in my chest that always came before action. "Let me be clear," I said, my voice dropping to the quiet tone my teammates used to call my danger voice. "I spent 15 years as a SEAL. I fought in places you couldn't find on a map. If Mr. Wilson wants to send threats my way, he should understand what he's stepping into." A flicker of uncertainty crossed Scarface's eyes. "Good." But it was quickly replaced by something worse. Amusement. "A SEAL, huh? Impressive." He nodded to his companions. "We know exactly who you are, Captain Miller. Distinguished service. Silver Star. Purple Heart." He took a step closer. "But that was then. Now you're just a farmer. Alone." The wind shifted, carrying the scent of my neighbor Sarah's lavender field. I wondered if she could see what was happening from her farmhouse down the road. "I'm authorized to make you an offer you can't refuse," Scarface continued. "Take the money, walk away. Start fresh somewhere else." I met his gaze. "This is my somewhere else." Scarface shrugged. "We'll be in touch. Wilson wants an answer by Friday." He turned to leave, then paused. "By the way, those 2 Arabian horses in your south pasture, beautiful animals. Worth what, 30,000 each? Would hate to see anything happen to them." They climbed back into their vehicles, and I watched until they disappeared down my driveway, dust settling in their wake. My hands were steady as I picked up my coffee mug, but the liquid inside rippled from the pounding of my heart. I pulled out my phone and stared at it, thumb hovering over a contact I hadn't called in years. Team Chief David Ramirez wouldn't know what to do, but calling him meant admitting this was serious, that the peaceful life I'd built was under threat. Instead, I walked to the barn and pulled out the footlocker I kept locked beneath the workbench. The combination came to my fingers without thought: my mother's birthday. Inside lay the parts of my life I thought I'd left behind. My service weapon, cleaned and oiled, 3 passports with different names, a satellite phone, and a small black book with numbers that would never appear in any phone directory. I was halfway to the gun cabinet in my bedroom when I spotted movement through the kitchen window. A pickup truck was approaching, Sarah's old blue Ford. I quickly locked the footlocker and slid it back under the workbench. Sarah didn't need to know about this. Not yet. Not until I figured out why a crime boss was so interested in my quiet farm in the middle of nowhere and what I was going to do about it. As her truck pulled up, I forced myself to smile, but my mind was racing with questions that had no good answers. Why my land specifically? What did Wilson really want? And how far was he willing to go to get it? The morning after Wilson's men visited, I woke before sunrise from a dream where I was back in Kandahar, surrounded and outgunned. Old habits die hard. I checked every room in the house, peering through windows at the darkness outside. Everything seemed normal until I reached the kitchen and spotted something that made my blood run cold. My back door was slightly ajar, the frame splintered near the lock. Someone had been in my house while I slept. Nothing seemed missing at first glance. Not a robbery then. A message. I grabbed my gun from under the sink and swept the house again, more carefully this time. In my office, I found it. My desk drawers had been searched, papers ruffled. The deed to my farm was now sitting in plain view, a red X drawn across it in what looked like lipstick. Outside, the first rays of sunlight were breaking over the eastern hills. I pulled on my boots and jacket, grabbed a flashlight, and headed to check the property. The cool morning air filled my lungs as I walked the perimeter, alert for anything out of place. I found a neck surprise at the south fence line. Clean cuts through my barbed wire, posts knocked loose. Beyond the broken fence, hoof prints led away into the forest, my 2 Arabian horses gone. Not stolen by ordinary thieves. They'd left behind the saddles and tack worth thousands. This was about sending a message. Pinned to a fence post was a white envelope. Inside, a note with 3 words, just the beginning. My jaw tightened as anger washed over me, hot and familiar. In my past life, I'd hunted enemies across mountains and deserts. Now, they had come to my home, violated my peace, taken animals I cared for. The calm, adjusted veteran facade I'd built over 3 years was cracking, revealing the warrior underneath who had never really gone away. I was examining the fence line for any clues when I heard Sarah's truck approaching. I'd known Sarah Reynolds for nearly 2 years now. She'd moved into the old Johnson place down the road, a city woman trying her hand at lavender farming. Pretty, smart, and private, she never talked much about her past, which suited me fine since I didn't share much about mine either. "Morning, Jack," she called, climbing out of her truck. Her dark hair was pulled back in a practical ponytail, and she wore worn jeans and work boots. Nothing about her suggested she was anything but a hard-working farmer. "I saw your fence was down from the road. Everything okay?" I hesitated, not wanting to drag her into whatever this was. "Just some trouble with developers. They want the land pretty badly." Sarah frowned, coming closer to examine the cut fence. "Developers don't usually resort to property damage right away." Her eyes narrowed. "Or horse theft. You noticed. The Arabs are hard to miss when they're in the pasture." "Jack, this looks serious. Should we call Sheriff Burke?" I almost laughed. Burke was a good man, but totally unprepared for whatever Wilson was planning. "Not yet. I need to understand what I'm dealing with first." Sarah studied my face with concern. "Those men yesterday in the black SUVs, they weren't developers, were they?" So she had seen them. I sighed, deciding to give her at least part of the truth. "No, they work for someone named Wilson. Ever heard of him?" The change in her expression was subtle, a slight widening of her eyes, a tightness around her mouth, but my years of reading people in high-stress situations caught it immediately. She knew something. "Dominic Wilson?" she asked, her voice carefully neutral. "The investor who's been buying up properties around the county?" "That's what they say." I knelt to examine the fence wire more closely. Though investor seems too clean a word for someone who sends armed men to deliver threats. Sarah was quiet for a moment. "Jack, if it's Wilson, you should consider selling. There's stories about what happens to people who get in his way." I stood up, meeting her gaze. "I don't respond well to threats, Sarah. Never have. Something flickered in her eyes, concern mixed with something else. Respect? Or was it fear? Just be careful. You're all alone out here. Not entirely alone, I thought, remembering the black book in my footlocker. But I simply nodded. I appreciate the concern. I'll be fine. Sarah looked like she wanted to say more, but thought better of it. If you need anything, even just someone to keep an eye on the place while you're gone, call me. She handed me a piece of paper. Here's my cell. My personal one, not the farm number. After she left, I walked the rest of my property, finding 2 more cut fence sections and boot prints that suggested at least 5 men had been on my land overnight. Professional work. They disabled my simple security cameras and avoided the motion sensors I'd installed near the house. Back inside, I pulled out my laptop and started researching Dominic Wilson. The public records showed a successful businessman with interests in real estate, shipping, and private security. Articles praised his philanthropy and community investment. But beneath the polished surface, I found whispers, forum posts about tenants forced out of buildings he'd acquired, rumors of connections to organized crime, and a suspicious fire at a farm he'd tried to purchase last year. Most concerning was what I didn't find. No personal information beyond the basics. No photos more recent than 5 years old. Nothing about where he lived or his family. A man with that much money and power should have left a bigger digital footprint. I was deep in my research when my satellite phone rang, a number I didn't recognize. Miller. I answered, keeping my voice neutral. Jack. The voice sent me back 15 years. Mike Delancey, my spotter during my sniper days. Got your alert. I'd set up a system years ago. If anyone searched extensively for information on former SEAL Team 6 members, alerts would trigger. Mike still worked in intelligence circles. Someone's digging into your service record, he continued. Professional job, not just some curious civilian. Wanted to give you a heads up. My mind raced. Timing's interesting. Just had some unwelcome visitors yesterday. Need assistance? Mike asked, no emotion in his voice, but I knew what he was offering. My old team would come if I called. Not yet, I said. But stay ready. Always am. Be careful, Captain. If they're researching your background, they know who they're dealing with, and they're coming prepared. The call ended, and I stood at my kitchen window, staring out at my peaceful farm. 3 years of therapy, of building a new life, of learning to sleep without weapons under my pillow, all threatened now. Part of me wanted to call my team, bring in the cavalry, but another part resisted. This was my home, my fight. As the sun climbed higher, I made a decision. If Wilson wanted a war, I'd give him one, but on my terms, using the land I knew better than anyone. I headed to the barn to begin preparations, unaware that Sarah Reynolds was watching my farm through binoculars from her upstairs window, speaking urgently into a secure phone line that would never appear on any bill. Target is preparing defensive measures, she was saying. He knows something's coming. We may need to accelerate the timeline. 3 days passed without any sign of Wilson's men. The silence was worse than threats. I spent those days getting ready, checking sight lines from the house, planting motion sensors at key points around the property, and moving my most valuable tools and supplies to a storm cellar I dug out behind the barn when I first bought the place. At night, I slept in 2-hour bursts, waking to patrol the perimeter before trying to rest again. On the morning of the 4th day, I was replacing the last of my security cameras when I spotted a dust cloud rising from the road. I grabbed my binoculars and climbed to the hayloft for a better view. 3 vehicles again, but this time they had brought friends. I counted 8 men total, all armed from what I could see through my scope. So that's how it's going to be. I muttered to myself, sliding down from the loft and moving quickly toward the house. I had maybe 5 minutes before they arrived. Inside, I pulled on my tactical vest, an old habit I'd hoped to never need again, and loaded my shotgun. A pistol went into my hip holster, and I slipped a combat knife into my boot. The familiar weight of the gear brought a flood of memories. Desert sand, night operations, the absolute trust in the men beside me. Now I was alone. Through my living room window, I watched the vehicles park in a half-circle facing my house, a basic containment formation. They weren't even trying to hide their intentions now. The men spread out with practiced precision. Not street thugs. These guys had training. Military or law enforcement backgrounds, I guessed. Scarface stepped forward, dressed more casually today in dark pants and a tactical shirt. He cupped his hands around his mouth. "Captain Miller, we know you're in there. Mr. Wilson would like another word." I stepped onto the porch, shotgun held low but visible. "Seems like a lot of men for a conversation," I called back. Scarface grinned. "Just insurance. Mr. Wilson values his investment. Still not selling," I said evenly. "That's not why we're here today." His grin widened. "We found your horses. Beautiful animals. Currently enjoying Mr. Wilson's stables." I felt a flash of anger, but kept my face neutral. "What does Wilson want?" "He's impressed with your stubbornness. Want to offer you a job instead of buying your land." That caught me off guard. I hadn't expected a job offer. "Not interested," I replied. "50,000 a month," Scarface continued as if I hadn't spoken. "All you have to do is allow us to use a portion of your property for storage. You keep the farm. We use the abandoned mine shaft on the north side of your property." So that was it. The old mine shaft that ran under part of my land. I'd sealed it off when I bought the place, figured it was unsafe and forgotten about it. Now I understood. Wilson wasn't after my farm. He wanted what was under it. "What exactly would you be storing?" I asked, playing dumb while my mind raced through the possibilities. Drugs, weapons, money, whatever it was worth millions if they were offering me that kind of monthly payment. Scarface shrugged. "Doesn't matter. You get paid, you mind your business, everyone's happy." A movement in the tree line behind them caught my eye. Just the briefest flash of something reflective about 200 yards back. Someone else was watching us. Friend or foe, I couldn't tell. "Last chance, Seal," Scarface said, spotting me on the porch and dropping all pretense of friendliness. "We know all about your service record. Impressive, but it won't help you now. 8 of us, 1 of you. Either for this. I need time to think about it," I said, buying myself space. "This is a big decision." Scarface nodded. "You got 24 hours. Then Mr. Wilson's next offer won't be so generous." He turned to leave, then stopped. "Oh, and Captain, don't try anything stupid. We got men watching your farm around the clock." As they climbed back into their vehicles, I kept my eyes on the tree line where I'd seen movement. After Wilson's men disappeared down the driveway, I waited 10 more minutes before slipping out the back door and circling through the woods. Moving silent and low like I'd been taught, I approached the spot from behind. Whoever had been watching was gone, but they'd left evidence: cigarette butts, boot prints, and something unexpected, a small digital camera mounted to a tree, aimed at my house. I examined it without touching it. Not Wilson's men. They wouldn't need hidden cameras when they had openly threatened me. Someone else was interested in my farm, or maybe in Wilson's operation. As I made my way back to the house, a realization hit me. The mine shaft must connect to something beyond my property. Old maps I'd seen when buying the place showed the mine extending for miles underground, with exits on 3 different properties. One of those properties had to be connected to whatever Wilson was planning. Back in my house, I pulled out the county land records I'd kept in a filing cabinet. The property to the north of mine had been bought by a shell company 6 months ago. The one to the east belonged to Sarah. My satellite phone rang again. This time, it was a different voice from my past, Rodriguez, our team's demolitions expert. "Cap, what the hell is going on out there? Mike says you've got trouble." "Nothing I can't handle," I replied, not wanting to pull my old team into danger. "Bullshit," Rodriguez said. "Mike's been monitoring chatter. Whatever's happening on your farm has some serious players interested. NSA picked up communications about an acquisition at your coordinates." My blood ran cold. The National Security Agency was monitoring activity near my farm? "Rod, I need information. What's under my land? The old mine shaft, where does it go? What's it connected to?" There was a pause. "I'll make some calls. But Jack, if NSA is watching, this is bigger than some local crime boss. Be careful." After hanging up, I went to my gun safe and pulled out equipment I hadn't touched in years: night vision goggles, tactical radio with encrypted channels, and body armor that still fit despite 3 years of farm living. Tonight, I was going to explore that mine shaft. Whatever Wilson wanted was down there, and I needed to know what I was fighting for or against. As the sun began to set, I noticed Sarah's truck coming up the driveway. She stepped out looking worried, a large bag over her shoulder. Jack, she called, her voice tight. We need to talk. I think I know what Wilson is after. The first attack came exactly at midnight. I was ready for them. After my conversation with Sarah, I'd set up multiple defensive positions around the property. She had left hours ago, taking with her information that had changed everything I thought I knew about my quiet farm. The security system I'd installed after their first visit triggered silent alarms as they breached the perimeter. My phone vibrated in my pocket. Motion sensors tripped at the north fence line. 8 heat signatures moving in pairs toward the house. I moved silently through the darkness, guided by the night vision goggles I kept from my service days. The familiar green glow transformed my peaceful farm into a battlefield. In a strange way, it felt like coming home. The first 2 men were easy. They moved with competence but overconfidence, not expecting resistance so early in their approach. I disabled them with quick strikes from behind. Not lethal, but they wouldn't be getting up anytime soon. I used their own zip ties to secure them and confiscated their weapons, H&K pistols with suppressors, professional equipment. Their radios crackled with queries about their position. When they didn't respond, the mood of the remaining attackers changed. They became more cautious, sticking to cover, communicating with hand signals I recognized from my own training. Find him, a voice hissed in the darkness. I recognized it as Scarface. Wilson wants this finished tonight. I circled behind the barn, using the knowledge of my own land to move unseen between their search patterns. One of the men stepped into my prepared trap, a simple snare that left him dangling upside down from an oak tree, cursing until I relieved him of his weapon and radio. 5 left. A burst of gunfire shattered the night as one of Wilson's men fired wildly into shadows. Poor discipline. The others yelled at him to hold fire. They didn't want to alert neighbors. Too late for that. I keyed my satellite phone. Breach in progress. I whispered. Multiple armed hostiles on property. Mike's voice came back instantly. Police have been anonymously notified. ETA 12 minutes minimum. Local sheriff dispatcher reported they're understaffed tonight. Convenient timing. I wondered if Wilson had arranged that too. Can you get clear? Mike asked. Negative. This ends tonight. I clicked off before he could argue. Using the barn for cover, I spotted 2 more men approaching the house from the east side. I waited until they passed, then moved behind them. A quick blow to the base of the skull dropped one. The other turned, raising his weapon, but I was already inside his guard. A knee to the stomach doubled him over, and a strike to the temple put him down. 3 left, including Scarface. I made my way to the house. Slipping in through the back door, I deliberately left unlocked. Inside, I moved to the living room window. Through my scope, I could see the remaining men regrouping near their vehicles, looking tense and angry. My finger tensed on the trigger of my rifle. It would be so easy, but I wasn't that man anymore, or at least I was trying not to be. Killing wasn't my goal tonight. Information was. A noise from the basement made me freeze. Someone was already inside the house. Moving silently down the stairs, I spotted a figure hunched over the old storm door that led to a tunnel I'd discovered months ago, a tunnel that connected my basement to the mine shaft. Sarah had confirmed my suspicions earlier today. The mine wasn't just abandoned tunnels. It had been converted years ago into a secure storage facility accessible only through certain properties. Properties that Wilson had been systematically acquiring. The figure at the storm door turned, and I recognized him immediately. Not one of Wilson's men, but a face I knew from news reports. Senator James Marshall, chairman of the Defense Appropriations Committee. What was a U.S. senator doing breaking into my basement in the middle of the night? Freeze, I said, keeping my voice low and my weapon steady. The senator's eyes widened. Captain Miller, he said, his voice surprisingly calm. This isn't what it looks like. It looks like you're trying to access the tunnel to the mine shaft, I replied. The same mine shaft Wilson's men are willing to kill me for. Marshall glanced nervously at the storm door. Wilson doesn't know what he's dealing with. Those tunnels contain classified material. Old Cold War storage. Nuclear fail-safe plans, blackmail files on Soviet agents. Things the public was never meant to see. Now pieces started falling into place. And you need to get to them before Wilson does. Marshall nodded. Some of those files could destroy people still in power today. We thought everything was secure, but when Wilson started buying properties with access points, a crash from upstairs interrupted us. The remaining attackers had entered the house. Behind me, I ordered the senator, moving him to a corner of the basement behind an old workbench. Stay down. Footsteps crossed the floor above us. I heard Scarface's voice. Check the basement. He's got to be here somewhere. I positioned myself in the shadows beside the stairs. The first man down took a blow to the throat that left him gasping for air. The second barely had time to raise his weapon before I disarmed him and slammed his head against the wall. Only Scarface remained. I could hear him moving cautiously above. It's over. I called up. Your men are down. Police are on their way. Tell Wilson he picked the wrong farm. Silence, then a chilling laugh. Oh, Miller, you have no idea what you've stumbled into. A small object bounced down the stairs. Tear gas. I grabbed the senator and pulled him toward the storm door. Cover your face. I yelled as the canister began spewing gas. I fumbled with the lock, finally forcing it open and pushing Marshall through before following myself. The narrow tunnel was pitch black. I activated my night vision again and urged the senator forward. Move! This connect to the mine shaft. Behind us, I heard Scarface enter the basement, coughing despite his gas mask. We had maybe 2 minutes before he realized where we'd gone. The tunnel opened into a larger space, the main shaft of the old mine. Unlike the abandoned ruin I'd expected, it was reinforced with modern supports and lined with metal shelving holding dozens of locked containers. The air was dry and cool, preserved by ventilation systems I couldn't see. Which way? I asked Marshall. He pointed deeper into the mine. The primary storage is half a mile in, but we need access codes. The sound of pursuit echoed from the tunnel behind us. No time, I said, pulling him behind a shelving unit. What exactly is Wilson after? Why my farm specifically? Marshall's face was grim in the green glow of my night vision. Your property contains the only entrance that isn't monitored by government security systems. A design flaw from the original construction. If Wilson accesses the facility through your land. The beam of a flashlight swept the cavern as Scarface emerged from the tunnel, gun drawn. I know you're in here, Miller, he called, his voice echoing. You think this is about your worthless farm? Wilson wants what's in container 37. The evidence that would put him away forever. My mind raced. Evidence against Wilson? This wasn't about classified government secrets. The senator's expression confirmed my suspicion. He'd lied to me. There never were any Cold War secrets, were there? I whispered. This is about Wilson. Marshall looked trapped. Not entirely. The facility is real. But container 37 contains something personal. Evidence from an FBI operation against Wilson's organization 5 years ago. Evidence that would also implicate certain political figures. Figures like Senator Marshall himself, I realized. The pieces clicked together. Why he was here personally, why he'd risked breaking into my house. Scarface was moving methodically through the shelves, getting closer. I made a quick decision. Run for the far exit, I whispered to Marshall. I'll deal with him. As the senator slipped away, I stepped out from behind a shelving unit. Looking for me? I called. Scarface spun, firing a wild shot that echoed deafeningly in the cavern. I ducked and rolled, coming up behind another shelf as he fired again. Wilson's paying me triple to bring him your head, he shouted. Nothing personal, Captain. I moved silently between the shelves, using the skills that had kept me alive through dozens of combat missions. Scarface was good, but I was better. I circled around until I was behind him. It never is personal, I said, pressing my pistol to the back of his head. Drop it. He froze, then slowly lowered his weapon. You don't understand what you're involved in, he said. Wilson isn't the real threat here. Then who is? Before he could answer, a new voice echoed through the mine shaft. That would be me, Jack. I turned, keeping my gun on Scarface, to see Sarah step from the shadows, her own weapon trained steadily on my chest. But it wasn't the gun that shocked me. It was the badge hanging from her neck. FBI, she said, her eyes hard and professional. Nothing like the friendly neighbor I thought I knew. and you're in the middle of an operation that's been running for years. The wail of distant sirens reached us from above, and I realized I was caught in a web much bigger and more dangerous than I had ever imagined. One where it was becoming impossible to tell friend from foe. Dawn broke over my farm in streaks of pink and gold, but I couldn't appreciate the beauty. My kitchen had become an improvised command center with Agent Reynolds, directing 3 other FBI agents who had appeared seemingly out of nowhere after the firefight in the mine. Senator Marshall was being held in my living room, his face ashen as he spoke quietly into a secure phone. The cut on my forearm throbbed as I tried to clean and bandage it. Not a bullet wound. Thankfully, just a deep gash from when Scarface had pulled a hidden blade during our struggle. He was now handcuffed in my barn, watched by 2 FBI agents while they waited for transport. "You should let me look at that," Sarah said, entering the kitchen with a first aid kit. Her voice was different now, more confident, more direct. The friendly, somewhat shy neighbor act had vanished completely. "I've had worse," I muttered, but let her take over. Her hands were steady and practiced as she cleaned the wound properly. "So," I said as she worked, "how long have you been watching me?" "Since before you bought this place," she replied without looking up. "The FBI has had this area under surveillance for 3 years. Because of the mine?" She nodded. "The facility under your property was originally built by the Department of Energy in the 1960s. Cold War storage, just like Marshall said, but it was decommissioned in the 90s. Most of the sensitive material was removed, but some things fell through the cracks. And Wilson found out about it. Not just Wilson." She finished bandaging my arm. "The facility became a black site for evidence storage. Things too sensitive or controversial for normal channels. Politicians, judges, intelligence officials, they've all used it over the years. Container 37 is just one of dozens holding potentially explosive information." I pulled my arm back, studying her face. "Why are you telling me this now?" "Because you're in too deep to be kept in the dark anymore." She sighed, sitting across from me at the kitchen table. "When Wilson's organization started acquiring properties with access to the facility, we needed eyes on the ground. I was sent in to establish a presence and monitor the situation. But Wilson moved faster than expected. So you've been watching me for 2 years, pretending to be my neighbor or my—" I trailed off, the weight of the deception hitting me all at once. "Friend," she met my gaze. "That part wasn't pretend, Jack." A small voice in my head warned me not to trust her, but everything about our interactions over the past 2 years flashed through my mind. Her helping me fix my tractor after a storm, sharing meals, the easy conversations on summer evenings. Had it all been an act? "I should have told you sooner," she admitted, her voice softening. "When I realized Wilson had targeted your property specifically, I wanted to bring you in. My superiors disagreed." "What's in container 37? I asked. The truth this time. She hesitated. "Evidence from an undercover operation 5 years ago. Video recordings implicating Wilson in not just organized crime, but treason. He sold weapons tech to foreign powers. But the evidence also caught several high-ranking officials accepting bribes to look the other way. If it goes public, a lot of powerful people fall, including Senator Marshall." She nodded. Marshall was on the Intelligence Committee then. He helped bury the investigation in exchange for campaign contributions. He's been trying to get access to the evidence for years. One of the agents entered the kitchen. "Agent Reynolds, we've got a problem. Wilson's on the move. Multiple vehicles heading this way from town." Sarah's professional mask snapped back into place. "ETA, 20 minutes, maybe less. And our backup? Delayed. The roadblocks we requested haven't been established. Someone's interfering with the operation." Sarah swore under her breath. "Marshall," she muttered. "He's still got friends pulling strings." She turned to me. "Jack, you need to leave. We'll handle Wilson." I looked out the window at my farm, the land I'd rebuilt my life on, the place that had given me peace after years of war. "No, this is my home. I'm not running." "This isn't your fight," she argued. "It became my fight when Wilson's men broke into my house and stole my horses." I stood up, the decision already made. "Besides, I know this property better than anyone. You need me." She studied me for a long moment, then nodded. All right, what's your assessment? I laid out a county map on the table. They'll come from 3 directions. The main road is too obvious. They'll know you've got people watching it. There's an old logging trail here. I pointed to the western edge of my property, and a creek crossing to the south that's passable in dry weather. If I were planning the assault, I'd split my forces and hit from all 3 points simultaneously. Sarah examined the map. How many men can we expect? Based on the resources he's shown so far, 20, maybe more. The agent who had delivered the news looked pale. We've got 5 agents total, counting you. 6, counting me, I corrected. Sarah's mouth tightened. We need to get the senator secure and call for emergency backup. She turned to the agent. Get Marshall to the safe house. Use the tunnel through the mine. It's our best chance to get him out unseen. And container 37? I asked. We move it if we can. Destroy it if we must. Her eyes met mine. The evidence is important, but not worth dying for. I wasn't so sure about that. Evidence that could bring down corrupt officials and a criminal organization seemed pretty valuable to me. There's something else you should know, Sarah said, her voice dropping. The lavender farm was never just a cover. I came here because... She hesitated, then reached into her pocket and pulled out a worn photograph. A man in military dress blues stood smiling beside a younger Sarah. My brother, Thomas. He was the original undercover agent who gathered the evidence in Container 37. Wilson's men killed him when his cover was blown. The operation was officially closed, the evidence buried. I've spent 5 years trying to finish what he started. The personal revelation hit me hard. All this time, I thought she was just an agent doing her job. But this was about justice for her family. I'm sorry, I said, reaching out to squeeze her hand before I could think better of it. Her fingers tightened around mine for a brief moment before she pulled away, professional again. We got 15 minutes to prepare. What do you need? I stood, military training taking over. Access to your weapons cache. I know you have one. I've seen the reinforced panels in your truck bed. She nodded to one of her agents, who hurried out to retrieve it. And I need 5 minutes in the barn. Alone. She raised an eyebrow, but didn't question me. 5 minutes. Then we need a defensive plan. As I headed for the barn, I pulled out my satellite phone. It was time to call in favors from people I trusted with my life. Mike, I said when he answered on the first ring. Remember that extraction plan we discussed? I need it now. The diner was neutral ground, a small roadside place called Maze about 20 miles from my farm. I sat across from Dominic Wilson himself, a man whose face I'd only seen in online photos until today. In person, he was older than I expected, with silver hair and the lean, hard look of someone who'd fought his way to the top. His expensive suit couldn't hide the street fighter underneath. 10 million for the farm, he said casually, stirring sugar into his coffee. Cash today. I kept my face neutral as I sipped from my own mug. The coffee was bitter and strong, exactly what I needed after 36 sleepless hours. Why my land specifically? There are dozens of farms in the area, many bigger and better located. Wilson smiled coldly. Smartcel. Let's just say what's under your property is worth far more than what's on it. As we talked, I spotted 3 of his men positioned around the restaurant. One by the door, one at the counter, and one 3 booths away, pretending to read a newspaper. What Wilson didn't notice was the DEA tactical team Sarah had stationed outside, or the 2 retired SEALs from my old unit sitting at the counter, looking like ordinary truckers. The meet had been Wilson's idea, delivered through a burner phone left by one of his men during the brief firefight at my farm yesterday. The battle had ended in a stalemate when Wilson's forces had suddenly withdrawn, just as they seemed ready to overwhelm us. It was a tactical retreat, I knew. He was regrouping, not giving up. Your farm is the only property with unmonitored access, Wilson continued. The other entry points have government security systems, motion sensors, the works. Yours was overlooked during installation. A clerical error that's worth a fortune to the right buyer. And you're the right buyer? He leaned forward. I have international clients very interested in certain items stored in that facility. National secrets have a high market value these days. So Sarah had been telling the truth, or at least part of it. Wilson wasn't just after Container 37 and the evidence against him. He was planning to access all the containers and sell their contents to foreign powers. You don't strike me as the treasonous type, I said casually, watching his reaction. His eyes hardened. Patriots, traitors, childish concepts. There's only power in those smart enough to take it. And where does murder fit into that philosophy? The FBI agent you killed 5 years ago, Thomas Reynolds. Wilson's expression didn't change, but something flashed behind his eyes. Casualties happen in any war. Reynolds knew the risks. His sister is determined to see justice done. I watched him carefully. Now I had his full attention. Sarah Reynolds is FBI? I nodded, seeing no reason to hide what he would soon discover anyway. Your intel isn't as good as you think. Wilson recovered quickly. It doesn't matter. By this time tomorrow, I'll have what I came for. The only question is whether you walk away rich or don't walk away at all. There's something else you should know about my farm, I said, leaning forward. I'm not the only dangerous person protecting it. Before he could respond, the diner's door swung open. Sarah walked in, wearing tactical gear with her FBI badge visible on her chest. Wilson's men tensed, hands moving toward concealed weapons. Dominic Wilson, she announced loudly. You're under arrest for the murder of federal agent Thomas Reynolds, conspiracy to commit treason, and about 24 other charges I've been looking forward to reading you. The diner erupted into chaos. Wilson's man by the door pulled his weapon, only to be taken down by one of my SEAL teammates. The one at the counter tried to grab a waitress as a hostage, but was dropped by a precise shot from Sarah's sidearm. A shoulder wound, not fatal. Wilson himself remained perfectly still, his eyes locked on mine. This changes nothing, he said quietly. I have men at your farm right now. That evidence will be destroyed before you can get back. The sound of sirens filled the air outside as DEA and FBI vehicles surrounded the diner. Sarah approached our booth, weapon trained on Wilson. Your men have already been dealt with, she told him. We found a mole in the FBI who was feeding you information. It's over, Wilson. Something like admiration flickered across Wilson's face. Agent Reynolds, you have your brother's determination. He was a worthy adversary. Save it for your confession, she replied, her voice tight with emotion. As federal agents entered the diner and began securing Wilson and his men, I stepped outside for a moment of quiet. The adrenaline was wearing off, leaving me exhausted. My satellite phone vibrated with a message from Mike. Farm secure. For hostiles captured. No casualties. Sarah joined me outside a few minutes later. Wilson's being transported to a federal holding facility. No bail, no deals. Any evidence? Safe. We're moving everything from the facility to a more secure location. She hesitated. Your farm will be released back to you once the investigation is complete. I nodded, watching the federal vehicles pull away. What happens now? Now, she sighed, the weight of a 5-year mission finally lifting from her shoulders. Now I finish my brother's work. The evidence in Container 37 doesn't just implicate Wilson. There are senators, judges, even foreign diplomats involved. This will get ugly before it's over, and you'll be right in the middle of it. She nodded. I don't have a choice. There's always a choice, I said. After my last deployment, I could have stayed in, moved up the ranks. Instead, I chose peace. A quiet life. And how's that working out for you? She asked with a small smile. Before I could answer, my phone rang. It was Rodriguez. Cap, we got a problem at the farm. The barn's on fire. Wilson had a backup team we didn't know about. They hit after we secured the first group. My stomach dropped. The barn was the heart of my operation. Equipment, feed stores, everything I needed to keep the farm running. I'll be right there, I said, already moving toward my truck. Sarah followed, catching my arm. Jack, wait. Let the fire department handle it. My farm, my responsibility, I replied, pulling away. Her eyes searched mine. This isn't over, you know. Wilson has connections. Even from prison, he'll try to silence anyone who knows about Container 37. Are you warning me or asking for help? Maybe both. She held out a hand. I could use someone with your skills. The FBI always needs good consultants. I looked at her outstretched hand, thinking about how much had changed in just a few days. The peaceful life I'd built seemed to be going up in flames, literally and figuratively. But there was also an opportunity here, a chance to use my skills for something meaningful again. "Let me save my barn first," I said. "Then we'll talk." As I drove toward the column of black smoke rising in the direction of my farm, I knew two things with certainty. My quiet retirement was over, and the war with Wilson was far from finished. He had resources, connections, and nothing to lose. And somehow, I'd become the central player in a game of shadows and secrets that stretched far beyond my little farm. Sarah's words echoed in my mind. This isn't over. She was right. It was just beginning. The raid didn't go as planned. We should have known Wilson's reach extended further than we imagined. As I raced my truck back toward the farm, the police radio Sarah had given me crackled with frantic chatter. Federal agents calling for backup. Reports of gunfire. Then nothing but static. I pushed the old truck to its limits on the country roads, dust billowing behind me as I took corners faster than was safe. The smell of smoke grew stronger with each mile. When I crested the final hill overlooking my property, my heart sank. The barn was fully engulfed in flames, orange and yellow tongues licking at the darkening sky. Even from a distance, I could see figures moving, exchanging gunfire. Instead of driving straight in, I pulled off onto a hidden service road I'd cleared for emergencies. Years of tactical training kicked in as I grabbed my rifle and extra ammunition from under the seat. The truck would be too obvious a target. I'd approach on foot through the woods.